o'clock, so I'll call the meeting to order. We'll start with the pledge of allegiance to bring our allegiance to full strength. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. The first order of business is to approve the agenda, and Eric asked to add to a time to introduce the new member of the Planning Commission. So is that,
I'll make a
I
motion.
mean, not the Planning Commission, the Planning Environmental Services staff.
I'll make a motion.
Okay, is there a second? Okay, to approve. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, agenda is approved with the addition. The approval of the minutes of the last meeting.
Make a motion to approve the minutes.
Okay, is there a second? Elizabeth, a second. Jordan had made the move to approve the minutes as written. Is there any discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
The minutes are approved. The next order of business, well, we will add in there right then for Eric to introduce our new member.
A good opportunity to test out the microphone. Good
Okay.
afternoon, Board of Adjustment. It's my distinct pleasure to introduce the new member of the Planning Department, Mr. Aaron Locker.
Okay, hello, welcome.
Well, pleasure to meet you all here today and to tell
Okay,
us a little bit about your background and where you're from. Sure. So I'm from Winona County, third generation on a family farm.
Can you speak into the microphone?
Sure. From Winona County, I'm the third generation on the family farm. I come here via La Crosse County, via Houston County. So I was previously the zoning supervisor in La Crosse County. And prior to that, I was the environmental services director in Houston County. Looking forward to a shorter commute and, working with
okay,
more closely with my neighbors here in Winona.
yes, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and then the next order of business is docket number BOA 6/15/23, number 1. The petition of Beth Turner and Aaron Jeffson, who seek a variance regarding the following: to allow a new residential driveway on the steep slopes and to be located within the Bluff Natural Features Overlay District pursuant to chapter 11.6.1 of the Winona County zoning ordinance, and amended to include a neighbor's letter regarding the easement. And Eric will have a presentation.
Okay, I guess there was one piece of new information that you'll hopefully see in your books there. It's a letter from the adjacent neighbor that's to the affected property. And I'll clarify that when I get into the PowerPoint of what that might exactly refer to. This afternoon, we're considering a variance application to chapter 11.614, which essentially is a prohibition from development on steep slopes and bluffs in Winona County. The house site is not part of the bluff overlay or the steep slopes. It's essentially dealing with just the new intended residential driveway that is in play here with this application. Quick overview. This is in Homer Township, section 23, parcel number, and it's located off of a township road. If you see the image, to access the property, most traffic would come from County Road 7, which is located a mile or two south of Pickwick. And County Road 7 meanders along the southern edge, and then it turns into basically Cedar Ridge Drive, which is that bottom green township road. And as you see that last farmstead on the western edge of that image, yet another spur township road, Cedar Point Road, comes off of. Just wanted to point out what is interesting with this Homer Township Road, Cedar Point Road, is that if you look at that green line in that site plan, on the Homer Township Road plat, It exists all the way up to the quarter line on paper. In reality, there's no chance or no intentions of the township to improve that section or make that road. Actually, as you churn up Cedar Point Road, it's a steep incline as you come into that farmstead and you're looking at that individual's well, their house, and their barn located on the three sides. And essentially that's what the reference is going to mean when we look at that neighbor's letter or correspondence in regards to this. With the proposal, it's mainly looking at that red dotted line in which the applicants have consulted with excavating, and it's basically the best solution that they've looked at with the entire acreage. And when I say the entire acreage, the parcel is 136.4 acres. So there's only really one reasonable building site on top in the open field. And there's essentially what they have come forward today is the best attempt to access that. A little bit closer up, you can see where the property line is on the western edge. So their property stops at that point, showing where the proposed location of the house would be, and the proposed driveway off of Cedar Ridge Drive and the township road. Again, the one option they looked at was securing an easement from the neighbor to the west. And in order to do that, they'd have to acquire or try to get an easement. It kind of almost looks like a field road where they come in with farm equipment now. And I'll just step to the side to point out kind of what that proposal at that time was. Have to secure an easement coming off of this township road part and actually then connect it. And then there's a series of dips and changes in terrain to actually get up to that point. Couple of images that just show on the left of this image that it's the majority is a wooded parcel with significant portion of it falling under the bluff area. The map on the right, the hatched image, is based on our topography and our terrain and our LiDAR data, which shows that those are the areas that would most likely fall under the bluff ordinance as far as limitations go. I've access to Minnesota Topo data from the web. It's a good source to shoot a hypothetical cross-section or elevation profile. And this is just my rendering showing that they're trying to gradually go up that steep segment as gradual to achieve at least a 12% elevation throughout the duration of that. And if you look at the profile bar, just by looking at the change over roughly 400 feet, it's changing roughly from 1130 to an elevation of roughly 1210, 12.5. So it's showing, over roughly 400 feet. To achieve that, it would be, basically, let's see, about 80 feet and change in elevation from start to finish on that proposed driveway. Site considerations, again, parcel's 136.4 acres. Access from any other point on that property would be extremely challenging. Building site is located on the least steep area of the property, and the proposed driveway, as looking as it is in its natural state today, ranges from 20 to 29%. This is an image that's provided by the applicant showing the access point in which they would like to construct the access to that. This is looking northerly from the center of the existing township road, Center Ridge Drive, towards where the driveway entrance would be started. A Couple of photos that I took last week just to see kind of the vegetation. Not as clear. I mean, it's got quite a bit of woody vegetation. And I went up, got off the road right away out of the grader ditch and got into the parcel, just looking back down at kind of essentially the access point and then looking up towards where they would essentially continue on with the drive access. Again, the one on the left is just showing the dynamics of the township road and the driveway. Picture on the right is again submitted by the applicant, showing how it opens up on top, in which they would wish to make the new home that they would like to have on the property.
Is that the existing field driveway going east, is that?
This is on the very top. Imagine it'd be somewhere on the field up here.
And that's the, the slope or hill in the distance is where the house is proposed, or the structure, living quarters is to be built.
Yeah, it's centrally located in that field. And the bluff setbacks appear to be able to be met without much difficulty. Of course, if it ultimately is approved, we do have several more steps that we'd have to go through with the applicant. As you see with the recommended conditions, the variance is probably one of the biggest considerations that's in front of the board at the moment. If this is approved, the applicants would have to appear with the planning commission and county board in order to receive the conditional use permitting because of the steep slopes again. There's nothing for the less than 40 because again, it's 130 acres, but because there is a driveway access that's on steep slopes, that's a permitted activity in the zoning ordinance by a conditional use permit too. So at that point, they're going to need a significant more detailed site plan. They're going to have to probably have some engineering. We'd have a soil and water visit that would have to review and look at the site with staff too. So we'd have more information, but ultimately it would have to be circulated through the planning commission and the county board too, as additional provisions. And that is recommended in the conditions that's in the staff report.
Does the town maintain the road to the neighboring farmstead? Plow it?
They do, but it's very difficult. I pulled up there and it's hard to back out or to navigate. I imagine they do put some crushed rock in and they probably have a plow place, but it's very tough to even turn a truck or a piece of equipment off of that north part.
Is there a pathway through the farmstead to continue to the?
No, not really. You're almost looking at the well. The cistern and the well sits almost right on top when you come into that. And then you got a barn to the left and a house to the right. That's looking at both sides. It's tight quarters. And that's part of the issue about maybe why the Homer Township Board commented like they did. And then when we turn it over to the applicant who was at the meeting, she might have some additional information too.
Was that road, Township Road, officially abandoned back in the 70s or 80s? There was an opportunity for all unused cartways and town roads to be abandoned officially.
This one was not. It shows up on the 1984 road plat
Yeah,
that the
so-
township
so
signed
someone
off on.
wants to- Someone wants to, or if they wanted to go to the next hill and build there, they don't need an easement because it comes right over to the line, so they could build.
There's still some legal questions, I would say, before they could even attempt that. Yeah.
Technically though, the easement, I mean, the road is there.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. It exists on paper.
Okay,
In theory, it's going to
I
be
hear
more
you,
than
but-
challenging.
just to make the point that they could build on the other hill.
This is just looking up towards, this is on the main township road. This is Cedar Ridge Drive, just looking up towards, you can see where it's showing that there's a turnoff to the right. That would be that other Cedar Point one that serves just the one farmstead. Kind of gives you an idea what the characteristic is. As you're coming up that segment, it's quite steep in most of those points.
Does the township have to issue a driveway permit, or
They would.
they would?
Yes, yes. If they blade in a new access off of Cedar Ridge Drive, a township permit is required for that. And in response, they did appear in front of the Homer Township Board meeting on May 8th. And they did indicate support for this variance request as submitted. And concluding, staff recommends the board consider all the materials and testimony in making the decision. Staff has put together analysis and draft findings that support granting the variance. And should the Board of Adjustment approve the petition, staff has also included 3 conditions for your consideration. And with that, I guess entertain any questions or.
Go ahead, Jordan.
So where that township road continues up, if that were a viable option, homeowner would not necessarily need an easement to go from where it meets that property line up there and start a driveway there. Would that be correct?
About the only reasonable one, it still is going to take a lot of excavating to do it, would be to create through an existing tractor or field road, but it's
Which would require an
would
easement.
require an easement. I think to do this, at the moment, the physical limitations based on the well, the structures, that's impossible without eminent or condemnation of some structures and official actions on the township board and neighbors and another can of worms to do
So
that.
they'd need an easement if they took that field road.
Yeah,
And,
That's-
and what they've decided is not to ask for the easement
No,
because the dotted line doesn't require an easement from the farm, right?
correct. What they propose is that this is self-contained on their property.
Right,
So they're in
right,
control
right.
of the action.
so does the road even go past that farmstead? Is that just like
No.
where it would go? So really, there's no road up there?
Right,
The
exists
town
on
would have to
paper.
Create another road?
Yeah, it goes back through the historical township records that they might have had aspirations, or maybe 100 years ago, there was a farmstead that may have served, I don't know the deep history on that, but it just exists on paper, but in practicality, it would be extremely,
So in other words,
Not
somebody
feasible.
drilled a well in the middle of the town road.
yeah. And it probably maybe existed too. It could be
That's
a very
possible,
old
right,
well.
Right, yep.
So
Yeah.
Eric,
Go ahead, no, go ahead, Ed.
so Eric, the proposed building and living quarters does not fall within the steep bluff issue,
Correct. Yep.
but it does fall within the prohibition of building between the top of the bluff and the toe, or not?
The driveway does.
Only
We consider driveway part of a development process.
And as I look at these provisions of the zoning ordinance, it looks like the purpose of the section 1163, which deals with these steep slopes, is to enhance basically the natural and scenic qualities of the bluffs in this Mississippi River area, correct?
It's multifolded, not only the Mississippi, but just bluffs in general throughout the county. That was important enough that the county board and the planning commission enacted those standards in the ordinance.
So with the purpose and the intent of the ordinance essentially is to prohibit development of buildings and any other, and specifically driveways within this scenic area. Is that
I
correct?
wouldn't call it a scenic area. I just call it a natural feature that has, because of erosion, because of water quality, because of the past issues. It's something that should be significantly looked at, and variances should be considered as a last resort. So you would, I think, look at it holistically, that it's because of the land, the size, looking at alternatives, in order, so it's a package of things I think you have to keep in mind.
So if the purpose intent of the ordinance is to preserve these scenic features by not allowing buildings and or driveways. Variances, if granted, are supposed to be in general harmony with the purpose and intent of the zoning ordinance, correct?
Yeah, you said one word though, you said preserve, and I know that word alone created a lot of consternation at the planning commission and county board during the ordinance enactment. So, kind of choice of words sometimes makes a difference.
Yes, and let me correct myself, and thank you for
Mhm.
catching me with that error. 11.6.3 of the ordinance recites that the section is established to protect and enhance the intrinsic, natural, and scenic qualities of the bluffs along the Mississippi River. Correct? So
Mhm.
that's the purpose and the intent.
Yeah,
That's the wrong ordinance section.
I'm,
That's the Mississippi River Bluffs ordinance. That's not what we're talking about here. This doesn't fall into Mississippi River Bluffs.
so what's the purpose and intent of the section that deals with this one, Eric?
it'd be the steep slopes, and it is defined by bluff, but it's outside the Mississippi River Bluffs corridor. But with that being said, we do look at development, and we do have to make sure that best management practices, that a proposal is executing as many considerations as possible with their plans. And thus, that's why we do have variances and opportunities for property owners to come in to make their case, to be heard objectively and throughout.
Go ahead.
No, that's fine.
So with the percentages of this slope, does this slope fall within the language of the zoning ordinance that prohibits developments and driveways?
For bluffs, for drive access, yes, that's why we do have a variance.
What is the purpose of prohibiting driveways on a slope like this? What is the purpose for doing that?
I think it could lead to significant land alterations if gone unchecked, if there's not enough safeguards, erosion, damage to infrastructure like township roads, county roads, adjacent properties. So essentially, that's, I think, to me, that's, I think, the heart of the issue. But it does get, with the bluff lands in southeastern Minnesota, there is an interest for tourism and for scenic beauty and some of the things that you were alluding to.
Elizabeth, go ahead.
What is the slope of the current Cedar Point Road?
Yeah.
How does that compare to what the people are requesting?
I haven't looked at that. I haven't pulled up a topography, but it's my understanding with Department of Transportation standards, they do try to keep roads 12% or less too,
Okay,
by gradually,
but that looks like it's been there a long time.
yes.
And what's the condition of the soil and that whole piece? And is that a prognostication of what?
Well, we've had an exceptionally dry season so far, maybe earlier in March and April after snow and rain events but it looked in rather good condition when I was up there this month. With that being said, I mean, if you do have significant rain events, there probably is some washouts and some gravel, and the township would probably be the best source of what their routine or what their maintenance regimen looks like.
Would this new driveway have more recommendations for care than that other one, which is probably 50 years old more?
Yeah, it depends on the rock base, depends on the gut, the I think their approach to try to keep it at a minimum percent and then conditions where there's critical drainage points that intersect it by installation of culverts or check dams or water bars or, getting immediate seeding on exposed area. Those are all things that are part of a crucial land alteration part of the permit that comes into play.
And that would all be required.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Eric.
Yep.
I think we can move on to,
I have a few more
I think
questions.
maybe we can wait till we get to discussing it.
Okay.
Okay. All right, is anyone here to represent the petitioners? Okay, come and state your name and address and.
My name, oh gosh, I'm
Go
short.
down there, right, okay.
My name is Beth Turner. Our address is 3301 26th Street South, La Crosse, Wisconsin. And we've owned this parcel for about 5 years now.
Okay.
The one thing I was wondering, can you go back to the slide that shows the grass? How do I do that? Okay. Right here. Oh, that one. So actually, this picture on the right is the township road. So that is the road. I'm just going to go to the screen and point where that starts. So this actually starts right here.
Oh, okay,
So
right
this
there.
is the township. So up until that point, as Eric was alluding to, it is gravel up until our neighbor Rich's property. And then the gravel ends right where his house is. So then the road would technically on paper continue between his house and his shed. But the picture on the right is actually the township road going all the way back to the parcels that are used by the fishers for farming.
So there is a field road,
Yep, that's it.
town road.
Yeah, it's technically a township road, but
Right.
that's it.
Okay, but there is a, field driveway there, okay.
Yep,
So
yeah.
So that's going north.
That's going north. Yeah, the biggest issue we have when we tried to evaluate going through that is that you can't fit equipment between Rich's house and his shed. I mean, they are literally probably about 15 feet apart.
Right.
So we'd have to deal with asking him to move things. We did ask for an easement from him as well, and that's in the letter.
Mhm.
For right here, to try to make this an
Okay.
easier adjustment in. But at this time, they decided not to award us that easement.
What's the reason?
I didn't exactly get the details other than they didn't really want somebody driving through their front yard. Any other questions, anything that I can answer?
So with that township road just being more like their personal road,
Yeah,
does the township maintain that portion for them at all?
not
or
at
is
all.
that
So it's all
just like
mowed by the
ignored?
farmers that use it.
So they just basically like own that strip and they,
Correct.
okay.
Yeah, and before we bought this, we met with Harlan, who's the township chairman, before we bought it to talk about the proposed driveway off of Cedar Ridge. And that's where we were a little bit blindsided that it was going to hit this variance. And so that was one of those where we tried to do some due diligence before we got to this point and make sure that the township was on board with it due to it coming off of Cedar Ridge and then discussing all of the erosion, the washouts, those items with them. So we've met with an excavator and the township together to talk about some of that erosion concerns. And so with the driveway going, it's about 500 feet. So it's at a 9.2% grade is the driveway.
So that would be less steep than the town road going to the farmstead, actually.
Yeah, the Cedar Point Road is very, very
Right
steep.
up the hill.
It just,
Okay.
yeah, it just pretty much just goes straight up.
And if that's what my question was
Yeah.
about. Was if that road is intact
Yeah.
and it's cared for,
Yeah.
then there should be no reason why this one couldn't if the.
That makes sense.
if
Yeah.
the left slope.
Yeah, it is. I mean, like Eric was alluding to, there's not a ton, we don't get a ton of washout on that Cedar Point Road. I mean, obviously we do get some because it's so steep, but it is quite steep compared to the proposed driveway. Any questions for me?
Have you worked with an engineer at this point on the driveway?
Not yet. We've just talked to them so far. We haven't had them put any plans together, but that's kind of where we calculated the slope with them and kind of got those ideas for what we need to do for erosion control as well. But we haven't had anything formally from them yet. Yes.
It's interesting. I'd like to understand what a proposed building 40 by 80 with living quarters means?
Yeah.
Do you have a business?
So it's a shop pretty much just for us to put our tractor, our implements in that, and then live in the little corner of it. So they call it a shouse now is the fancy term for it. So it's a shop and a house all together.
Okay. And do you farm?
Right now, we actually have all the land in CRP. So all the tillable land is in CRP, and then all the wooded I put into managed forest plan about 1.5 years ago.
So you will be doing some farming?
Yeah, so yeah, that's a good point. That not necessarily that we're farming it, but we do have to maintain it for CRP. So we do have to mow the fields and do controlled burns from time to time.
So it'll be just maintained
Yes,
perpetually as CRP?
correct.
So essentially with the driveway and whatever the permit is, but you could build a house there.
Correct.
I mean, because you have the septic and all that. So
Oh,
essentially,
yes.
yeah. So I mean, which is fine. I mean, but yeah.
If we can't get the driveway, obviously, though, I mean,
No, I
that's
mean,
the
once you get all
building
that,
block.
though, yeah, then, yeah, because that's, it's considered then you can, I mean, you can actually, with the permits given and all that, you could
Yes,
live
sir.
there.
Yes, sir. Yeah,
Yeah.
we verified all the different steps with our 500 feet away from feedlots, the 100 feet, I think,
Yeah.
probably what Ed was pointing to, the 100 feet away from the bluff land on each side. We verified that with zoning and planning that we will meet all those requirements.
Well, if no more questions,
quick.
oh, go ahead, Jordan.
Do you have any experience with plowing a driveway that steep at all?
Yes, so I'm originally from Wisconsin and I live in the middle of 100 acres out there, and our driveway is probably about a 10% grade.
Yeah.
So knowing that it's going to be very precarious at the same time, I think my concern is actually at the very bottom of that driveway, making sure the turn into that driveway is going to be. So for example, when we do need to come home, we'll be coming from the west side because the east side is going to be a hard turn in, trying to disturb
I see, yeah.
the area as least as possible. We don't want a huge open mouth at the bottom of the driveway either.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you for coming. All right, I would entertain a motion to open it to the
Motion
public.
to open the public hearing.
Okay. Jordan has moved and Elizabeth has seconded to open the meeting to the public. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
The meeting is open to the public. Is there anyone else who wishes to address this petition before the board of Beth Turner and Aaron Jepson? For the second time, is there anyone else who wishes to address this petition before the board? BOA 61523, number 1. And for the third and final time, is there anyone who wishes to speak to the petition before the board? If not, I'd open my
I'll
entertain.
make a motion to close the public hearing.
Okay, Jordan has made the motion to close it and Elizabeth has seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
The meeting is closed to the public and open to the board members to discuss.
So Bob, may I ask Eric a couple more?
Yes,
questions?
sure.
Thank you. Eric, is it customary not to have the licensed engineer or geologist site plan at this stage of the proceeding?
It is a mix usually, and I think with everything considered, we have to have adequate information that just depicts what the applicant wants to do. In this case, it's a variance based on the terrain and the percentages. It's been a contentious point to have applicants spend $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 at a variance level without any assurance that that would go forward. So I think this is the biggest challenge at the moment is in front of you folks. And I think that is the most logical time, depending the outcome of that, to commission additional costs. And that's not only extended for excavators, but that goes as far as surveying, architectural, engineering, legal, until there's some further in the process. And that will be obviously needed at the planning commission level and county board should this go on forward.
So it sounds like this is customary not to have this expensive site plan at this stage of the process.
Correct, yes.
And the provision of the ordinance that essentially prohibits structures and driveways between the toe and the top of the bluff, is that applicable here or not?
It is an area defined between the toe and the top because there's a clear, but the toe would always be down by the Pickwick Creek by the County Road 7. So there's land that segments it or breaks it up like a county road, a township road network. So it is defined as that area. There is, if you look at a larger area, it would fall within that toe and top.
I know there was discussion on this maybe last month. What's the purpose and intent of, from your knowledge here in the county, of why was development prohibited with this provision in the ordinance?
Well, under the density, there was some speculative building where if you had a few acres on top of a bluff that was in a different quarter section, you could further maybe your resale marketability of properties by splitting them up into 5 acres or 35 acres under the old zoning. And we had cases like that in the county where it did happen. And essentially it wasn't bluff development by the house, but they were building driveways to access them through bluffs, which seemed to be a convenient loophole through our ordinance of past. So with the new ordinance, we added in driveways and access as part of the development. So we brought that into the fold with the new ordinance in 2011 to try to get a better control or regulate the whole project from the driveway to the building site.
Okay, anybody else? Thank you, Eric.
Yep.
Does anybody else have questions for Eric while he's up here? Okay. All right. Well, one thing I guess I would say is that the comprehensive plan does call for taking care of the woodland, which Beth has said is part of the plan. So it sounds like the woodland get better care now than before, instead of just letting run wild, which is, but the comprehensive plan is also to help people make good use of their property. And also they will be using the land, taking care of the land around their dwelling. So,
I actually have one more question.
oh, yes, go ahead.
You said that the tillable lands in CRP.
Yep.
And the woods are in this forest protection, what is it?
Managed forest plan.
Managed forest plan.
Yep.
What do you do to manage it?
So for right now, we're trying to clear out all the buckthorn. So for the forest right now, we're trying to clear out the buckthorn more than anything. That's been our ongoing battle.
So, and that falls under protection.
Correct. Yep. That was one of the recommendations from the forestry department. The other thing that we just did, we planted about 250 Norway spruces along the property line to help with some of the wind stop from the neighbor's house, because not the neighbor's house, but the neighbor's field, because it's just wide open otherwise. So I'm trying to help a little bit of the soil retention as well across those both.
How did the deer react?
They ate about 20% of them so far. We also, the biggest issue we're having right now is with being such a dry season. So we're trying to water them as much. I would say the deer probably cleared out about 20% of those spruce. Okay, good.
20%, wow.
Yeah, we were really surprised how much have made it so far. The one thing that, with it being because we obviously have to go within the bounds of the CRP agreement too, so we can't get too far into the fields to try to get too many rows and layers in. So we're trying to work, we just met with the FSA office on Monday as well to make sure we're abiding within their lines, because we are technically prairie CRP, so that means no trees. So we're trying to make the balance of getting the forestry department on the managed forest so we can build up the forest, but yet keep the forest out of the field as well.
And you also use it for hunting
Yes,
for yourself, or do you?
just us personally.
How was it used before you bought it? Was it Bayfield? Was it ever planted?
I don't know if it was ever planted. When we got it, it was in CRP.
Okay,
So, and it was owned by 3 daughters. It was given to them in inheritance, from my understanding. And it was kind of left to go its own way for the most part.
so the neighbor didn't own it or farm it?
No, he did not.
All right. Any other questions while she's up here? If not, thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Well, my take is too, is that the driveway is the least variance necessary to use the property and make good use of it. And it seems to fit into the farming context. And
And I respect your position and
Right.
advocation.
Mhm.
I look at the whole purpose of the enhancement and preservation of the bluffs and the specific language of the ordinance, which recites that proposed development, including all structures and driveways, are prohibited between the toe and the top of the bluff.
but not absolutely. There can be a variance.
Yep.
Okay,
And
so-
that's why we're here.
Yeah, that's why we're here. So it's kind of a catch-22.
And the purpose and the intent of that provision of the ordinance, of course, is to enhance and promote the beauty of the bluff. So
Mhm.
from my perspective, I think that's a very important concept in the county zoning ordinance. And I personally, as a board member, don't want to vote in a way that would continue to encourage people to come in with driveways or proposed developments that would little by little, incrementally over time, not enhance the beauty of the bluffs. And we sit here and we get an applicant in month 1 and month 5 later, we get another applicant. And at the end of, 5 or 10 years, you may have granted 15 or 20 variances that are intruding on the bluff land and creating developments on steep slopes that someone at the county at some time made a decision that this was very important to not have this type of development, and is polite and
Mhm.
professional as the
But
property.
Ed, with all due respect, I mean, because you're not stopping at all to give anybody a chance to reply. That's not a valid criteria. Because every variance, every CUP is separate by itself. You cannot cite another one as an example, and it doesn't give precedent for anything down the slope. I think from my experience with roads, I don't think you'll even see this driveway. In the wintertime from down below, it won't be visible. In the summertime, it'll be covered. So I think we'll have no impact on that slope as long as they take care of the erosion. There is a new driveway in Wilson Township, and Eric, did Wilson adopt the same criteria township that the one on the county has for driveways?
They have varying degrees.
Okay, because there's a new one on Highway 43. It was done in the last couple of years. That goes up the bluff to the west, right as it started at the hill by the stone quarry. And that one is a big scar on the hillside. And I was just curious. I didn't check with the township or anything. And that one I would. Whereas this one, I think is, in my personal opinion, I don't think you'll even notice it.
Well, I think there are advantages and disadvantages to anything that requires variance, and caring for the forest and trying to keep the buckthorn down is a thing that we know conservationally in Minnesota should be happening. So their care is worth something. And I believe that, I think I trust. But what I'm saying is that I think it isn't all going to be possibly bad. There's a lot of support to nature
Mhm.
that they are proposing and committing to.
And they're already doing, if I
What?
You're already doing that, aren't you?
Yeah,
Right.
right.
Yes, which is admirable.
And that's actually, as we talk about all the trade-offs for wetlands and so on and so forth, that actually takes care of it by itself. That's mitigation. So I mean, I look at the general purpose as much as possible is what the impact is on, you know, how big the population is being impacted by a house, say, on the end of a bluff, or if it's very little. But then also to always try to enable the landowner to use the land as much as possible. And we're giving the opportunity, I mean, that's why the variances exist. So it isn't, you can't make a rule that's just always that way.
No,
And
it's
you can't-
regulated.
And you also can't speculate as to what would happen in the future. You have to wait to see. And if that happens, that we have all kinds of driveways all over the place and big scars on the hillsides, then at that point, that variance, you know, that variance board could decide based on the impact of the
Well,
whole thing.
then it's too late.
No, but well, I mean, that's just pure speculation. We can't base and also, Elizabeth, we can't base it on, you know, how much good or what they're gonna do with it. I mean, if they're gonna, you know, whatever they're gonna do up there, if it's gonna be a machine shop and, you know, that's all separate. I mean, I know what and the intent is good.
Yeah,
But
they could also
it's-
sell it after, as soon as they put the driveway in.
That's
and then
right.
There's no,
Yeah,
Why-
so.
why did-
can't speculate
Yeah.
on that either.
Right. Yeah, I'm just taking, I mean, we really can't evaluate if it's a legitimate thing, like if they can put a chicken coop up there and raise 4 million chickens. That's not our.
Yeah.
That's not our purview. But,
So if I could. then
go ahead.
finish.
Yep.
Yep.
Say some more.
So basically, as I read the zoning ordinance, the purpose of all of these provisions regarding the steep slopes and the bluffs is to protect and enhance the beauty of the bluffs. And if that's the purpose and intent of the zoning ordinance, and the enhancement of the bluffs, then the general purpose, as recited, would sort of be abrogated or defeated by granting the ordinance, the variance.
How can you judge that this driveway is not enhancing?
If I,
Protecting, enhancing, how can you say that?
if I may.
Go ahead.
Is it okay? Ed, what you're referring to is the purpose of section 11.6.3, correct?
Correct.
That's the Mississippi River Bluffs Overlay District. That refers to the area 1 mile from Highway 61. If I'm not mistaken, this is further than a mile. This is not within the Mississippi River Bluffs Overlay District.
So what is the purpose and intent of the provision
Mhm.
that of 11.6.4, proposed development including all structures and driveways?
That's the wrong section. That wouldn't be the correct section. The correct section is 11.6.1, 1. 11.6.1,
Or
4. Oh, that's the setback. There is a toe on the top of the bluff. 11.6.13, developments and other land disturbing activities are prohibited on slopes over 25%. And then there's 11.6.12 is proposed development, including all structures and driveways that occurs on slopes. That's the conditional use permit.
What about 11.6.1.4?
Yeah, proposed development, including all structures and driveways are prohibited between toe and top of the bluff. Yes.
You've
So
been
the-
here, I know, a long time.
Yeah.
And what was the purpose and intent for the county implementing that provision in the zoning ordinance?
If you look on page 193 of the zoning ordinance, chapter 11, 11.1, intent and purpose. There's a nice long paragraph that describes the intent and purpose, and then it gives you 5, specific points that's based on. And I'll just read the 5 points. You can read through the whole paragraph. I won't do that for you now. But the 5 points are the intrinsic value of natural resources, natural areas, and wildlife, flood control and the treatment of stormwater runoff, acknowledgement of historic resources and their educational and artistic significance. Number 4, recreational amenities. And 5, aesthetic and quality of life contributions. Most of the paragraph above is talking about it's talking about critical geological and environmental attributes found throughout the county in the forms of shorelines, floodplains, wetlands, steep slopes, blufflands, and karst features. And then it gets into erosion control, some of the environmental problems that come with developing on steep slopes. It actually does not talk about that aesthetic piece at all, except for that 5th point. And really, when you get into going back to the chapter to when we adopted this in 2011, there were many conversations around where we draw the line, how we lay out our zoning ordinance as far as bluffs and steep slopes. What ended up getting adopted is what we have now, but most of that intrinsic natural beauty and aesthetic piece was a concern along the Mississippi River corridor along Highway 61, essentially. And that's where the Mississippi River Bluffs came in as a overlay in order to put a lot of those concerns and that additional concern that people had along that area for aesthetics. A lot of that was put into that overlay, the Mississippi River Bluffs piece. So while they are saying that there is they are worried, especially, and that's what the setback, a lot of the setback was try to set back from the edge in order to keep a lot of that development from being so noticeable and impacting those aesthetics. A lot of the steep slopes pieces specifically that are in this section that we're considering today were for erosion control and environmental degradation based on some of the development that we've seen in the past, not necessarily for aesthetics.
What is the slope of this hill where the driveway is on, 20%?
You'll have to ask Eric about that. He knows the site much
Because the ordinance says 25%. So if this is 20%, there's no.
Correct. 20 to 29 is where the proposed driveway would be
Okay.
built upon. And, one thing that Lou was mentioning, I was just going to add too, is that prior to 2011, our bluff regulations were only protected in shoreland, essentially. So you had to be affiliated with 300 feet from a trout stream or 1,000 feet from the Mississippi. So all these bluffs, like these features, were somewhat neglected. They weren't covered under the realm of the bluff regulations. So that was part of the intent too, is to bring the whole county with features like that under some additional regulation.
Jordan, you were going to.
Yeah, it's completely outside of what we've been talking about, but I guess my little hangup was on the variance cannot be alleviated by a reasonable method other than the variance. So I was just wondering, how unreasonable is it to continue that township road? I mean, we talked about the buildings being in the way. Is it a whole process to reroute that road to where that easement would be?
Yeah, based on the terrain,
A variance would be easier than that.
much.
Also, the town road is very steep. This
Mhm.
driveway will actually, by more people using that other road, it
Mhm.
will add to the deterioration.
Yeah,
So-
I just think
I-
that the
I know what
township
you're-
is more
yeah.
capable of
I-
maintaining it than
Yeah, but
I
know
do have a
townships-
picture of that drive access. I could print it out to pass it around if you're curious how steep it is when you come right up on top of the farmstead and the well and
And
situation.
also safety with more people. I mean, in the wintertime,
Yeah.
ice, safety for the family that may be living, on there eventually. Go ahead, Kelsey.
I just wanted to clarify, you said previously too, when he was asking questions, that the toe was actually further down, so that one road already goes through
Yeah,
the middle, correct?
correct, yeah.
So we already have some disturbance there.
In most
Um,
bluff features, you would delineate from the very top and the bottom. It may cross multiple properties. It may cross a good part of a valley setting. You may not establish a toe, as I mentioned, all the way down to perhaps a water feature. And then as soon as you got rise over run that hits a certain percentage, you're on the toe. And everything else all the way to the plateau could hypothetically be considered part of it.
So just so we're all on the same page, Eric, it looks like from your staff report that this driveway is considered to be by you within the top and the toe.
Yes.
I just wanted to
Mhm.
make sure I
Sure.
wasn't misunderstanding you.
Any other questions? Okay, the slope with 20 to 29% slope, seems to me it's rather questionable whether they need a variance. I mean, how do you decide? Because we average it out as 24.5, isn't it, percent? That's less than 25. So can they go the driveway and slope set, it's kind of,
I think it's for the
it's kind of,
toe on the top of the block.
I
too.
think we lean towards being conservative to requiring it, but yeah, that's where maybe if somebody disputing the procedure, they could counter us with engineering diagrams and excavators that show that what you just mentioned, that it's not applicable.
Okay.
But we thought this was the best course of action.
Thank you, Eric. Well, if somebody wishes to make a motion, we'll continue discussion if we have a motion.
Yeah, I would like to make a motion, that we approve this variance with the attached conditions. And in addition to that, I just want to say I drove up there and as far as a steep township road is concerned, a hill road like that, there's very little erosion in the ditch there. And normally we see like
Uh,
deep washouts in
Mhm.
that type of place. And that's
It's
the
probably
flattest part
probably
of that hill.
relatively short hill, I suppose, but it's very steep.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
there's a culvert that crosses under the township road just past this driveway. So you always get a little bit of a bottleneck when you put a culvert in,
Mhm.
but it's not gonna wash all the way down the hill. It's gonna get kicked out across the road shortly after that. So,
Mr. Chair, you should get a second. before
Yes,
you
I'm,
continue.
yeah.
yeah, sorry.
And
I can end,
that's
I can
okay.
end that
Is
there.
there a second?
Second.
Okay. Jordan has made the motion to approve the petition variance as written with the conditions, and Elizabeth has seconded it. We're open for discussion. Any discussion?
I think that we should move to approve it. I think that you make good points, but I also think that the reason that they have to apply for these is because we're regulating them instead of them just being able to do whatever they want. So this way, these conditions make sure that they're gonna do it with the most environmentally positive impact, in my opinion, and that people are paying attention to what they're doing as opposed to like them having to not have to apply for this and then you never know what's going to happen and the road could be
Yeah.
washed out in one rainfall or something. And so
Yeah, I think that's because I agree with Ed. That's why we have these.
yeah,
That's why we have this, but it is so that there are some precautions and checkpoints.
Guard level,
Guardrails, and then we look at it, and then everybody has their criteria, and also the findings, because looking at it a lot of time, these findings sound pretty, solid, but they're subjective.
Mhm.
And, you know, as everybody say, I'm looking at the driveway, if somebody doesn't like the driveway, so that's a big scar, because I, like, one up in 43 in Wilson Township. Or I can, if I like it, I say, oh, you won't see it. So I mean, yeah, so I think our purpose, and then also remember that each variance and each conditional use permit, it stands alone. Nobody can use that as a precedent, for in the future. And so I would, tend to favor it too. Are we ready for a vote?
Yeah.
Okay, all those in favor of granting the variance petition as written and with the conditions, say aye.
I,
All those opposed, say nay.
Nay,
Nay, okay. The motion passes with 4 in favor and 1 nay. The variance is granted. And now I have to read the conditions. As soon as I find it, the appeal to the district court. All decisions by the Board of Adjustment and granting variances or in hearing appeals from any administrative order, requirement, decision, or determination shall be final, except that any aggrieved person or persons or any department, board, or commission of the jurisdiction or persons or of the state shall have the right to appeal within 30 days after receipt of the notice of the decision to the district court in the county in which the land is located on questions of law and fact. Any party that would like to submit an appeal to the decision just rendered at this public hearing must do so at the district court. The planning commission is not responsible for filing the appeal. And where are we here? What's the next order of business?
Adjourn.
Okay,
Motion to adjourn.
okay.
second.
Okay. Jordan has made the motion to adjourn and Ed has seconded. All those in favor say aye.
I.
Aye. The meeting is over. Thank you all.